The desert wind howled like a distant wolf as the sun dipped low over the cracked asphalt of Route 66, casting long shadows that stretched like accusing fingers across the empty roadside diner. Inside, under the flickering neon sign that buzzed Last Chance Cafe, a boy no older than 12 sat alone at a corner booth, his small frame hunched over a crumpled notebook. His name was Alex. No one knew it yet, not here in this forgotten stretch of nowhere, but his eyes, wide and silent, told a story of fear that needed no words. He was mute, his voice stolen by some shadow from his past, and tonight, that silence was his only shield against the 3 roughnecks who had burst through the door earlier, their laughter echoing like thunder. They were locals, the kind who thrived on the isolation of these parts, tattooed arms, faded denim, and eyes hardened by too many sunsets without purpose. One of them, a burly man with a scar snaking down his cheek, slammed a fist on the counter, demanding the last of the diner's watery coffee. The boy had been sketching in peace, his pencil scratching faint lines on the page, when they spotted him. "Look at this little freak," the scarred one sneered, sauntering over and snatching the notebook from Alex's hands. The pages fluttered open, revealing crude drawings of roaring engines and endless roads, interspersed with scribbled words that formed something like poetry, halting, raw, impossible for a kid like him to know. The boy froze, his heart pounding like a trapped engine, as the men crowded around. "What's this garbage?" another jeered, ripping a page free and crumpling it under his boot. Alex reached out, trembling fingers brushing the air, but no sound escaped his lips. The third man, reeking of cheap whiskey, grabbed the boy's collar and yanked him to his feet. "Cat got your tongue, kid, or are you just too scared to squeak?" The diner's lone waitress, a weary woman in her 50s named Clara, hovered at the edge of the counter, her hands twisting a dish rag, but she knew better than to interfere. Out here, trouble like this ended one way, quietly or not at all. The scarred leader leaned in close, his breath hot and foul. "Hand over whatever cash you've got, or we'll make sure you never draw another pretty picture." Tears welled in Alex's eyes, but he didn't cry out. Instead, he clutched the remains of his notebook to his chest, the paper crinkling like a final plea. The men laughed, shoving him back into the booth, the wooden frame groaning under the force. The air grew thick with tension, the scent of stale grease and fear mingling in the dim light. Clara whispered a prayer under her breath, glancing at the door as if willing help to appear from the endless night. And then, like a rumble from the earth's core, it did. The growl of engines shattered the silence first, a deep, throaty symphony that vibrated through the diner's thin walls. Headlights pierced the windows like searchlights, sweeping across the room in a blaze of white. Outside, a convoy of motorcycles pulled up in a precise arc, their chrome gleaming under the moon like polished steel. There were 20 of them, maybe more, Hell's Angels by the look of their cuts. Leather vests adorned with the iconic winged skull, wings spread wide as if ready to claim the sky. But these weren't the marauders of legend. Their rides were a mix of gleaming Harleys and weathered customs, engines purring with controlled power. Leading them was Ethan, a man in his late 40s, whose face bore the map of old wars, faint scars from shrapnel in Afghanistan, a jaw set like forged iron. His hair, streaked with grey, whipped in the wind as he killed the engine and swung off his bike, boots crunching on the gravel. Ethan's eyes, sharp and unyielding, scanned the diner through the glass. He wasn't here by chance. A faded tattoo on his forearm read, "Promise Keeper," a reminder of vows made in foxholes and forgotten in the haze of civilian life. Tonight, that ink burned like a fresh brand. He'd been riding with his crew, the Iron Vow MC, chasing ghosts of their own, when a gut feeling, a whisper from some old oath, pulled them off the highway. Now, seeing the shadows inside, he knew why. The door swung open with a chime that cut through the jeers like a knife. Ethan stepped in first, his presence filling the space, the scent of leather and road dust trailing him. His brothers fanned out behind, silent sentinels with hands near their belts, but not drawing. The scarred man whirled, bravado cracking. "This ain't your business, biker," he spat, but his voice wavered. Ethan didn't respond at first. His gaze locked on the boy, then flicked to the torn paper on the floor. He knelt slowly, picking it up with deliberate care, unfolding it to reveal lines of poetry scrawled in a child's hand, words about broken wings, silent roars, and roads that led to forgotten homes. "Something tells me it is," Ethan said finally, his voice low and steady, like gravel under tires. He stood, handing the page back to Alex, who stared up at him with eyes full of wonder and terror. The boy's fingers brushed Ethan's, a silent thank you that hit harder than any shout. The roughnecks shifted, exchanging uneasy glances, but Ethan's crew closed ranks, a wall of loyalty forged in fires no one else could understand. "You boys got a choice," Ethan continued, his tone even moral weight behind every word. "Walk away now, or explain to the sheriff why you're terrorizing a kid half your size." The scarred one lunged, fist raised, but two angels moved like shadows, one grabbing his arm, the other pinning the whiskey breather against the wall. It wasn't violence for its own sake, it was justice, quiet and unyielding, the kind that came from men who'd lost too much to let innocence shatter. Alex watched, notebook trembling in his grip, as the men were herded outside, their curses fading into the night. Clara exhaled, relief washing over her lined face. "Thank you," she murmured, but Ethan waved it off, turning to the boy. "What's your story, kid?" he asked softly, crouching to eye level. Alex hesitated, then opened the notebook, pointing to a fresh page. With a shaky pencil he wrote, "I ran, they hurt my mom, I can't speak." The words hung in the air, simple yet shattering, hinting at horrors left behind in a dusty town miles away. Ethan's jaw tightened, memories of his own losses, a brother gone too soon, a promise to protect what family remained, stirring like embers. He nodded, a pact forming in that shared silence. "You don't have to run alone anymore." As the crew gathered outside, engines idling like patient beasts, Ethan felt the weight of an old vow resurface. Years ago, in the chaos of war, he'd sworn to his fallen comrade to watch for the lost ones, the voiceless. This boy, with his impossible words, was the call he'd ignored too long. By dawn, the iron vow would ride. Not for revenge, but for redemption, a family chosen in leather and chrome. Alex climbed onto the back of Ethan's bike, clutching the notebook like a shield, the wind whispering promises of roads yet traveled. But as they roared into the night, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that the boy's poetry held secrets deeper than silence, secrets that would bind them all, or break them forever. The convoy stretched into the darkness, taillights fading like fireflies, leaving the diner bathed in quiet. Clara watched from the window, a tear tracing her cheek, knowing lives had just intertwined in ways no map could chart. The moon hung low over the endless ribbon of asphalt, a silver sentinel watching as the Iron Vow convoy carved through the night. Ethan's Harley thrummed beneath him, the vibration a steady pulse that matched the boy's tentative grip around his waist. Alex's small hands clutched not just the leather of Ethan's cut, but the notebook pressed between them, its pages fluttering like fragile wings in the slipstream. The air was alive with the chorus of engines, deep bass growls from the big twins, sharper whines from the customs, blending into a symphony that drowned out the world's cruelties. Road dust kicked up in faint clouds behind them, carrying the faint tang of exhaust and freedom, while ahead the horizon blurred into a promise of sanctuary. Ethan glanced in the side mirror, catching glimpses of his brothers riding tight formation. Marcus on his point, a veteran with eyes like polished flint, scouting the shadows. Lena, the only woman in the core crew, her bobbed hair whipping under her helmet as she flanked the left, her nursing scars from the ER making her the unspoken heart of their rides. They'd all answered that inexplicable pull tonight, the kind that came from oaths etched deeper than ink. Ethan's own promise lingered in his mind, a whisper from a desert foxhole where his squad leader, Tommy, had made him swear to look out for the ones left behind, the silent casualties of broken homes. "Family ain't blood, Ethan," Tommy had said, his voice fading with the last breath. "It's the ride you take for those who can't." The boy shifted slightly, his chin pressing against Ethan's back, and Ethan felt the weight of that trust like an anchor. They'd ridden maybe 20 miles when the first sign of trouble flickered in the rear view. Distant headlights, not friendly, weaving too close to the pack. Ethan signaled with a gloved hand, and the convoy tightened, engines dipping low as they crested a rise. Below, in the shallow valley, an old motel squatted like a forgotten relic. Faded sign reading Desert Rose, its neon heart pulsing weakly against the black. "We hole up here," Ethan called over his shoulder to Alex, though he knew words weren't needed. The boy nodded against him, a silent affirmation that cut deeper than any reply. They pulled into the lot, bikes circling like wolves claiming territory, chrome catching the motel's dim glow. Marcus killed his engine first, boots hitting gravel with a crunch that echoed his vigilance. "Eyes open, brothers," he murmured, scanning the empty pumps and the single car, a dusty sedan with out-of-state plates, idling near the office. Lena dismounted gracefully, her vest patched with a faded medic cross, and knelt by Alex as Ethan helped him down. "Easy there, kid," she said softly, her voice a balm honed from too many night shifts. Alex's eyes darted wide with the residue of the diner's fear, but he didn't pull away when she checked him over. No bruises visible, just the hollows under his eyes, speaking of nights without rest. Inside the office, the clerk, a wiry man named Roy with a mustache like tangled wire, eyed them warily from behind the counter, the smell of stale cigarettes clinging to the air. "Rooms for the night?" he asked, fingers drumming on a ledger. Ethan nodded, sliding cash across the scarred wood. "6 if you've got 'em, and keep the questions to yourself." Roy shrugged, handing over keys that jangled like loose chains, but his gaze lingered on Alex, a flicker of recognition or suspicion Ethan couldn't place. As the crew dispersed to their rooms, Ethan led the boy to the end unit, its door creaking open to reveal a space frozen in time, threadbare carpet, a bed sagging under faded quilts, and a window overlooking the vast nothing. Alex perched on the edge of the mattress, notebook in lap, his fingers tracing the cover as if it held the only map he trusted. Ethan leaned against the dresser, arms crossed, the room's single lamp casting long shadows that danced like unspoken doubts. "You write more than you let on, don't you?" he said, voice low, pulling the torn page from his pocket, the one from the diner. Alex's eyes met his, then dropped, but he took the paper, smoothing it with care. Slowly, he flipped to a new page, pencil whispering across the lines. Ethan watched, the scratch of graphite the only sound, until the boy pushed it forward. "Mum said words can fix what's broken, but mine don't work. They took her because of a promise she kept." The words landed like stones in still water, rippling through Ethan's chest. He sat beside the boy, the mattress dipping under his weight, and read them again. Promises, always promises. His own life was a ledger of them. To Tommy, to the crew, to the ghosts that rode shotgun on every mile. "Your mom sounds like she had fire in her," Ethan replied, his tone steady, masking the storm inside. "What was the promise?" Alex hesitated, then wrote faster, the pencil blurring. "To protect the road. Dad was like you, rode with colors. They came for him first, said he owed money to shadows. Mum hid me, but they found us. I ran when the door broke." Shadows. The word hung heavy, evoking the underbelly Ethan knew too well. Corrupt sheriffs turning blind eyes, lenders with grips tighter than chains. The crew had skirted those edges before, pulling folks from the brink without crossing into the dark. But this felt personal, a thread pulling at old wounds. Ethan placed a hand on the boy's shoulder, firm but gentle. No more running solo. The vows got your back. Alex looked up, tears glistening but unshed, and for the first time a ghost of a smile tugged at his lips, silent but profound. Outside, the night deepened. The distant headlights from earlier now circling the lot like predators scenting blood. Marcus knocked softly on the door, his silhouette filling the frame. "Trouble brewing, Ethan. That sedan, it's tailing us since the diner. Looks like those roughnecks called in favors." Ethan's jaw set, the promise in his veins igniting. He nodded to Alex, who clutched the notebook tighter. "Stay with Lena. We'll handle the shadows." As he stepped out, the air hummed with tension, engines firing up in the distance like a call to arms. The boy watched from the window, his impossible words now a beacon, drawing the crew into a ride that would test every vow they'd ever made. The convoy reformed under the stars, a brotherhood forged in the crucible of loyalty, ready to face whatever darkness chased the silent poet among them. But in the quiet of the room, Alex began to write again, lines forming like roads untraveled, hinting at a truth that could redeem them all, or unravel the fragile family they'd just begun to build. And now I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments they reach you. The gravel crunched under the tires like brittle bones as the iron vow bikes idled in the motel's shadowed lot, their engines a low, rumbling threat that vibrated through the cool night air. Ethan stood at the forefront, his silhouette etched against the faint glow of the Desert Rose sign, the neon buzzing faintly like a trapped insect. The distant headlights from the sedan had grown bolder now, slicing through the darkness as it prowled the perimeter of the lot. Its engine a muted growl that spoke of intent rather than innocence. Marcus flanked Ethan, his broad shoulders tense, one hand resting on the handlebars of his custom Softail, the leather of his gloves creaking softly. "They're not locals," Marcus muttered, his voice a gravelly whisper honed from years of scouting patrols. "That ride's too clean for these parts, probably hauling muscle for whoever those diner fools called." Lena lingered by the motel door, her eyes on Alex through the half-open window, the boy's small form silhouetted against the lamp's warm haze. She'd insisted he stay put, her medic's instincts overriding the pull of the ride, but Alex's gaze was fixed on the unfolding scene, notebook clutched like a talisman. The air carried the sharp bite of impending rain mixed with the oily scent of the bikes, a prelude to the storm brewing in more ways than one. Ethan nodded to his brothers, a silent command rippling through the crew like a shared heartbeat. No guns, no fury, just the unyielding wall of their presence, the kind of justice that came from standing firm when the world tried to push you under. The sedan finally committed, rolling to a stop at the lot's edge, its doors creaking open to disgorge four figures cloaked in shadow. The scarred man from the diner led them, his face twisted in the headlight's glare, flanked by the whiskey-soaked brute and two newcomers, hired shadows by the look of their ill-fitting jackets and wary stances. They carried no visible weapons, but their postures screamed confrontation, the kind fueled by grudges and bad debts. "You think you can just ride in and play hero?" the scarred one bellowed, his voice echoing off the motel's peeling walls, laced with the false bravado of a man cornered. The air thickened, the distant howl of wind through the scrub brush underscoring the tension, as if the desert itself held its breath. Ethan stepped forward, boots deliberate on the gravel, his crew fanning out behind him in a loose semicircle, unmoving, eyes steady. the winged skull patches on their vests catching the moonlight like badges of forgotten oaths. "We're not playing," Ethan replied, his tone even, carrying the weight of roads traveled and promises kept. "We're ending this. The kid's under our watch now. Whatever beef you have, it stops here." The scarred man's eyes darted to the motel window, where Alex's face pressed close to the glass. Pale and unblinking, a flicker of something, guilt perhaps or calculation, crossed his features, but it hardened quickly. "That boy's trouble you don't want. His old man's debts run deep. Folks like us collect. You interfere, and it's on all of you." One of the newcomers shifted, a wiry figure with a faded tattoo peeking from his sleeve, and Ethan's gaze sharpened. It was the mark of a rival crew, one that skirted the edges of the law, with loans that chained more than wallets. Memories surged in Ethan's mind, Tommy's voice in the foxhole, warning of shadows that preyed on the vulnerable, promising to pull them into the light. This wasn't just about Alex anymore. It was a thread unraveling old corruptions, the kind that turned small towns into traps. Lena moved then, slipping from the doorway to stand beside Ethan, her presence a quiet anchor. "He's a child," she said, her voice cutting through the bluster like a scalpel. "Whatever your collection is, it doesn't touch him. Walk away, or the sheriff gets a call about harassment on a federal route." The scarred man laughed, a hollow bark that didn't reach his eyes. But the whiskey brute hesitated, glancing at the sedan as if weighing escape. The standoff stretched, seconds ticking like a slowing engine, the scent of rain now heavy on the breeze. Marcus edged closer, his hand hovering near his belt, not for a weapon, but for the small recorder he'd started at the lot's entrance, capturing every word, every threat. It was their way, evidence over fists, truth as the sharpest edge. Alex, from his vantage, watched it all, his pencil moving feverishly across the page, lines forming in the dim light, words that captured the standoff like a snapshot. Shadows circle the light, but the roar holds them back. Promises on leather, stronger than chains. The scarred one lunged forward a step, fist clenched, but Ethan's crew closed the gap seamlessly, a human barrier of resolve. "Last chance," Ethan said, his voice dropping to that low timbre that had commanded squads through sandstorms. The air hummed with the idling engines, a reminder of the power at their backs. Something shifted in the scarred man's stance, the realization that this wasn't a fight they could win with bluster. He spat on the gravel, the glob dark and glistening, and jerked his head toward the sedan. "This ain't over, biker. Debts don't forget." His crew backed away, piling into the car with muttered curses, tires spinning dust as they peeled out into the night, taillights shrinking to red pinpricks against the black. The lot fell silent save for the settling gravel and the crew's collective exhale. Ethan turned to the motel, where Alex now stood in the doorway, notebook extended like an offering. Lena took it gently, reading aloud the fresh lines in a voice soft as moonlight. "The roar holds them back, stronger than chains." A murmur rippled through the brothers, nods of understanding, as if the boys' words had voiced the vow they all carried. Ethan knelt before Alex, meeting those wide eyes. "You see more than most, kid. That poem, it's got power. Like the roads we ride, silent, but they lead somewhere true." They gathered then under the motel's flickering sign, sharing water from canteens and quiet stories of rides past. Marcus recounted a dust-up in Nevada, where loyalty had turned the tide without a blow landed. Lena spoke of a patient she'd saved with words alone, echoing the boy's gift. Alex sat among them, accepted without question, his silence a bridge rather than a barrier. The rain began to fall in soft patters, washing the dust from their leathers, a cleansing that mirrored the moral clarity settling over the group. But as Ethan watched the boy sketch another line, the debt was a lie to hide the real thief. A chill traced his spine. The shadows weren't done. Alex's words hinted at layers deeper than debts, a corruption woven into the fabric of the towns they'd left behind. By the time the crew mounted up again, the storm had passed, leaving the air fresh and electric. Engines roared to life, a chorus of defiance as they pulled onto the highway, Alex once more on Ethan's bike, the notebook secure in his lap. The road ahead twisted, like the boys' unspoken truths, promising trials that would test their bonds. Ethan felt Tommy's oath pulse in his veins, stronger now, binding this chosen family in a ride toward justice, one silent poem at a time. The desert whispered secrets in the wind, and for the first time in years, Ethan believed they could outrun the darkness, or perhaps turn to face it head-on. The highway unfurled like a vein of silver under the first hints of dawn. The Iron Vow convoy slicing through the thinning veil of night with a precision born of countless miles. Ethan's Harley led the pack, its headlights carving tunnels in the pre-dawn gloom, the engine's steady thrum, a heartbeat that synced with the rhythm of Alex's breathing against his back. The boy had grown quieter since the motel standoff, his small frame less rigid now, as if the crew's unyielding presence had begun to chip away at the walls of his silence. The air rushed past, cool and laced with the faint, earthy promise of morning dew on sagebrush, while the taillights of the brothers behind formed a glowing chain, a lifeline stretching into the unknown. They'd pushed hard after the rain, covering ground toward a neutral town Ethan knew from old rides, Haven's Edge, a speck on the map where the crew kept a safe house tucked behind a weathered garage. It wasn't much, a converted barn with bunks and a communal fire pit, but it was theirs, a sanctuary forged from shared scars and unbreakable oaths. Marcus rode point now, his soft ale cutting the wind like a blade, while Lena brought up the rear, her eyes scanning mirrors for any echo of those retreating headlights. The desert gave way to rolling hills dotted with Joshua trees, their twisted limbs reaching skyward like silent witnesses to the unfolding drama. Ethan felt the weight of Alex's notebook in his saddlebag, its pages heavy with truths that tugged at the edges of his resolve. Tommy's promise echoed in his mind: protect the voiceless, no matter the cost. But what if the shadows chasing this boy were tied to something larger, a web that could ensnare them all? As the sun crested the horizon, painting the sky in strokes of amber and rose, the convoy eased into Haven's Edge. The town slumbered under a thin mist, its main street lined with clapboard shops and a single traffic light swaying gently in the breeze. The garage loomed at the outskirts, its roll-up door scarred from years of weather and wear, the faint scent of motor oil and pine resin greeting them as they pulled in. Engines sighed to silence, the sudden quiet amplifying the creak of cooling metal and the distant call of a mourning dove. Marcus dismounted first, unlocking the side gate with a key from his chain, his movements efficient, betraying no fatigue from the night's vigil. "Clear the perimeter," he said to the others, voice low as he scanned the tree line. Lena helped Alex down, her hand lingering on his shoulder, a maternal steadiness in her touch that spoke of losses she'd buried deep. Inside the safe house, the air was thick with the aroma of aged wood and faint traces of campfires past. Bunks lined the walls, quilts folded neatly, and a scarred oak table dominated the center, surrounded by mismatched chairs that had hosted more confessions than counsel. The crew settled in, shedding leathers and helmets with the ease of family, passing around thermoses of strong coffee that steamed in the chill. Alex hovered near Ethan, eyes darting to the unfamiliar faces. 8 brothers in total now, each carrying their own map of redemption. Javier, the ex-Marine with a limp from an IED that never slowed his ride. Riley, quiet and wiry, whose hands bore the calluses of a mechanic who'd fixed more than engines. They nodded to the boy, no questions, just space. A respect earned in the diner's glow. Ethan guided Alex to the table, pulling out the notebook. "Show 'em what you did back there," he said gently, the morning light filtering through dusty windows to illuminate the boy's face. Alex hesitated, fingers tracing the spine, then opened to the page from the motel. With a nod from Lena, he pushed it forward, the pencil scratches stark against the paper. Javier leaned in first, reading aloud in his gravelly baritone. The debt was a lie to hide the real thief. Mom whispered of roads where truth rides free, but they locked her away for seeing too much. The words hung in the air, simple yet piercing, evoking images of barred doors and whispered pleas. A murmur rippled through the room, heads nodding as pieces clicked, the roughnecks at the diner, the sedan's clean lines, the rival tattoo. This wasn't just a family feud, it smelled of institutional rot, a sheriff's office turning blind to bribes, or worse, pulling strings from the shadows. Riley set his coffee down, eyes narrowing. Sounds like the Edge County setup. Heard whispers last ride, some deputies shaking down folks for protection, using kids as leverage to silence complaints. The crew leaned in, the table becoming a council of war, voices overlapping in hushed tones. Marcus paced by the window, his silhouette framed against the rising sun. We steer clear of that mess usually, oaths or not. Poking the bear gets claws. But Ethan's gaze stayed on Alex, seeing the boy's shoulders sag under the weight of his own secrets. Tommy's vow burned hotter now, a moral compass refusing to veer. "Not this time," Ethan said, his voice steady as the road. "The kid's poem calls it out. Lies hiding thieves. That's our fight. We ride for truth, brothers. Always have." Alex watched them, the debate unfolding like scenes from his sketches, and something shifted in him. He grabbed the pencil, scribbling furiously, the graphite whispering across the page like wind over dunes. When he finished, he slid it to the center of the table, eyes downcast but resolute. Lena read it first, her voice catching slightly. "Silent wheels turn, carrying ghosts of the lost, a promise in ink. Stronger than bars. Ride with me, and the thief will fall, not with fists, but with light." The room fell still, the words wrapping around each man like a shared memory. Javier's eyes glistened, his mind flashing to a sibling he'd failed to save. Riley clenched his jaw, haunted by a youth stolen by similar shadows. Even Marcus paused his pacing, a rare crack in his armor, as the boys' impossible poetry wove their individual scars into a tapestry of purpose. Ethan placed a hand on Alex's back, the gesture bridging silences old and new. "You're one of us now, kid. That light, we'll find it together." The crew murmured agreement, a bond tightening like chains on a custom frame. Outside, the sun climbed higher, bathing the garage in gold. But the air inside hummed with resolve. A family chosen, ready to chase the thief behind the lies. Yet as they planned their next move, a faint rumble echoed from the road. Engines, not theirs, approaching slow and deliberate. The shadows weren't done testing their vows, and Alex's words had just lit the fuse for the confrontation to come. The safe house braced for what lay ahead. The boys' poetry, a beacon drawing them deeper into redemption's ride, one verse at a time. If this story is stirring something in you, hit that like button below. Your support helps these tales of honor and heart reach more lost roads. The rumble grew from a distant murmur to a thunderous proclamation, vibrating through the safe house walls like the approach of judgment itself. Ethan straightened at the scarred oak table, his coffee mug forgotten, the steam curling lazily in the morning light that slanted through the dusty windows. The crew froze mid-conversation, eyes snapping to the door, the air thickening with the sharp tang of alertness, motor oil from the garage mingling with the fresh scent of dew evaporating under the rising sun. Alex's pencil stilled on the notebook, his wide eyes reflecting the flicker of shadows outside as the engines crested the hill, a convoy of their own cutting through Haven's Edge like a blade through mist. Marcus was at the window first, parting the faded curtain with a calloused hand, his silhouette rigid against the golden haze. 5 bikes, maybe 6, he said, voice low and edged with gravel. Not ours. Patches look like the Shadow Reapers, those rival ink from the Sedan's guy. The words hung heavy, evoking the undercurrents of old turf wars, debts that festered like untreated wounds. Ethan rose slowly, his boots scraping the worn floorboards, the creak echoing the tension coiling in his chest. Tommy's oath pulsed there, a reminder that protection wasn't chosen lightly. It was the spine of their ride, the glue holding fractured lives together. "They want a parley," Ethan murmured, glancing at Alex, who clutched the notebook like a shield. "Or they want blood. Either way, we face it clean." Lena moved to the boy's side, her hand gentle on his shoulder, the medic's calm, a steady anchor in the brewing storm. "Stay back here, kid. We've got the door." But Alex shook his head, a silent defiance sparking in his eyes, and slid from the chair, notebook in tow. The crew exchanged nods, no forcing him. The boy's words had already woven him into their ranks, a silent brother earning his place. Outside, the Reapers pulled into the garage forecourt, engines cutting off one by one in a cascading silence that amplified the crunch of gravel under heavy boots. Their leader dismounted with deliberate slowness, a stocky man in his 50s named Harlan, his face weathered like cracked leather, a silver chain glinting at his neck. Flanking him were 4 others, vests patched with a snarling wolf emblem, their postures coiled but not aggressive. Yet, Ethan stepped out first, the screen door banging shut behind him like a gavel, the morning sun warming his back as it crested the Joshua trees. The air hummed with unspoken challenges, the faint breeze carrying the metallic bite of exhaust, and the earthy whisper of sage. His brothers fanned out, forming a loose line by the bikes, hands visible and empty, a show of honor, not threat. Harlan's eyes, sharp as flint, locked on Ethan, then drifted to the safe house door where Alex peeked out, half hidden behind Lena's frame. "Heard you picked up a stray," Harlan said, his voice a rumble like idling pipes, laced with the drawl of backroad dealings. "That kid's got strings attached. His pa owed my crew heavy protection money for runs gone south. We collect, or the road gets meaner for everyone." The words landed like dust settling after a skid, stirring Ethan's memories of similar shadows in his own past, debts that masked deeper corruptions, sheriffs pocketing envelopes while families crumbled. He held Harlan's gaze, the sun glinting off his Promise Keeper tattoo, a beacon of the vows that had pulled him from war's ashes. "We read the boy's account," Ethan replied, tone even, "carrying the moral weight of truths unearthed. Says the debt's a smokescreen, hiding a bigger thief, someone in badges maybe, shaking down the vulnerable to line their pockets." A murmur rippled through the Reapers, Harlan's jaw tightening as doubt flickered in his eyes. The standoff stretched, the heat building on the asphalt, sweat beading on brows as the sun climbed higher, painting the scene in stark contrasts of light and shadow. Alex emerged then, steps tentative but unyielding, notebook extended like a flag of truce. The crew parted slightly, allowing him space, and Harlan's brow furrowed as the boy approached, stopping a few feet away. No words from Alex, just the flip of pages, the pencil's faint scratches from earlier, now offered up under the relentless sky. Harlan hesitated, then took the notebook, his thick fingers careful on the edges, as if sensing the fragility of what lay within. He read silently at first, the lines from the table scrawled bold. "Silent wheels turn, carrying ghosts of the lost. A promise in ink, stronger than bars. Ride with me, and the thief will fall, not with fists, but with light." The words seeped in, simple yet profound, evoking the raw poetry of roads shared and betrayals endured. Harlan's crew leaned in, one by one, their hardened faces softening as the boy's impossible verse painted pictures of redemption. Ghosts not avenged by violence, but lifted by loyalty's quiet roar. A hush fell, broken only by the distant call of a hawk wheeling overhead, its cry a solitary echo of freedom's chaste. Harlan's eyes met Alex's, something cracking in that unyielding stare, a recognition of his own lost oaths, perhaps, from rides where promises had frayed under greed's weight. He handed the notebook back, voice gruff but laced with newfound respect. Kids got away with silence that hits harder than shouts. If it's badges pulling strings, that's no debt of ours. We've been played too. The reapers shifted, the aggression ebbing like tide from shore, replaced by a tentative alliance forged in the heat of moral clarity. Ethan nodded, the tension uncoiling like a released spring, the air lightening with the scent of possibility, pine resin and cooling engines blending into a fragile peace. They talked then, under the garage's overhang, voices low as plans formed. No raid, but a careful probe, calling in favors from old contacts, gathering whispers of the true thief without crossing into the dark. Alex sat on a crate nearby, sketching the scene, his pencil capturing the unlikely circle of leathers and patches united by ink on a page. Lena watched over him, a soft smile breaking her vigil, while Marcus scouted the perimeter, ensuring no unseen eyes lingered. As the sun peaked, Harlan clasped Ethan's forearm in a grip of solidarity, the chain at his neck catching the light like a vow renewed. "Ride safe, Promise Keeper. The boy's light might just blind the shadows for all of us." The reapers mounted up, engines firing in a respectful chorus that faded toward the horizon, leaving the iron vow in the golden wash of midday. Inside the safe house once more, the crew gathered around Alex, the notebook passed hand to hand, each man reading the verses anew. Javier's voice broke first, reading aloud with a tremor, "Ride with me, and the thief will fall, not with fists, but with light." Tears traced his weathered cheeks, unspoken grief for battles lost surfacing in the boy's words. Riley followed, his wiry frame shaking as memories of his own silenced youth flooded back, the poetry a balm on old scars. Even Marcus, the unflinching scout, paused by the window, eyes glistening as he murmured, "Stronger than bars. Damn if that ain't the truth we've been chasing." Ethan knelt before Alex, the room thick with emotion, the air humming with the quiet power of chosen family. "Your words, kid, they're the real ride, pulling us all toward something true." Alex's eyes shone, a silent bond sealing as the crew embraced the moment, tears shared like badges of honor. The path ahead twisted with risks, the thief's web waiting to ensnare. But in that circle of light, Tommy's promise felt alive, redemption rolling in on wheels of ink and heart. The desert outside whispered of trials yet to come. But for now, the impossible poem had united them, tears a testament to vows unbreakable. The midday sun hung high over Haven's edge, its rays filtering through the safe house windows like threads of gold weaving through the dust motes that danced in the still air. The Iron Vow crew sat in a loose circle around the scarred oak table, the notebook open at its center like a sacred text, its pages worn from countless hands passing it reverently. Alex perched on a stool at the edge, his small frame swallowed by an oversized flannel shirt borrowed from Javier, the fabric carrying the faint scent of engine grease and distant campfires. Ethan's gaze lingered on the boy, the weight of Tommy's old promise settling deeper now. A quiet fire that had transformed from duty to destiny. The room hummed with the afterglow of unlikely alliance, the Reaper's departure leaving behind a fragile hope, but the road to truth stretched long and shadowed ahead. Outside, the garage stirred with purposeful motion, Marcus tinkering with a chain on his Softail, the metallic clink echoing like a metronome to their resolve. Lena sorting medical kits in the corner, her movements precise, a silent preparation for whatever the probe might unearth. The air inside carried the rich aroma of reheated stew from a battered pot on the stove, mingling with the earthy undertone of cooling asphalt, baked by the relentless heat. Ethan leaned forward, his forearms resting on the table, the Promise Keeper tattoo flexing as he traced the latest lines in Alex's poetry. "This thief," he said softly, voice threading through the quiet like smoke. "We root him out clean. No shadows, no shortcuts. Your words light the way, kid." Alex nodded, his eyes deep pools reflecting the crew's unyielding loyalty, meeting each man's in turn. The notebook had become more than paper. It was a vessel for the boy's silenced voice, each verse a bridge, spanning the chasms of their shared scars. Javier, still wiping at his eyes from the earlier reading, cleared his throat, his ex-Marine baritone rough with emotion. "Reminds me of letters from home during the tours, simple words that kept us whole when the world tried to break us." Riley nodded beside him, his wiry hands folding and unfolding a bandana, haunted memories surfacing in the poetry's gentle insistence on light over fists. Even Marcus, drawn back from his task, stood by the door, arms crossed, his flint-hard eyes softening as he murmured, "Stronger than bars." "Yeah, that's the oath we live." The afternoon wore on, the sun arcing westward, casting elongated shadows that crept across the floor like fingers testing boundaries. Whispers from old contacts trickled in via burner phones, vague leads on a deputy in the neighboring county, a man named Harlan's crew had crossed paths with before. His protection rackets preying on riders and runaways alike. The real debt wasn't coin, it was silence bought with threats. Families torn to cover tracks of embezzled funds from town coffers. Alex's mother's imprisonment, the boy had scrawled earlier, stemmed from her witnessing a payoff, her promise to expose it sealing her fate. The crew pieced it together over maps spread on the table, the pencil lines of Alex's sketches overlaying routes like prophetic veins, guiding them toward the heart of the corruption. As dusk painted the sky in bruised purples and fiery oranges, they mounted up once more, the convoy a unified force now bolstered by the Reaper's relayed intel. Ethan felt Alex's grip tighten around his waist, the notebook tucked safely in the saddlebag, its weight a talisman against the gathering twilight. The engines roared to life in unison, a deep-throated symphony that vibrated through bones and bound souls, the scent of hot rubber and exhaust rising like an offering to the fading light. They rode toward the county line, a nondescript sheriff's outpost nestled in a dry riverbed, where the deputy held court under the guise of law. No assault planned, just presence, evidence, and the unyielding truth of Alex's words, carried like ammunition in their vests. The outpost loomed under a canopy of stars, emerging like hesitant allies, its floodlights harsh against the velvet night. The crew pulled up in formation, engines idling low, a wall of chrome and leather that commanded respect without a raised voice. The deputy emerged from the lit office, a paunchy figure in a starched uniform, flanked by two nervous aides, his face paling as recognition dawned. The Reaper's absence, a telltale void. Ethan dismounted first, Alex at his side, the boy clutching the notebook like a lantern. "We know about the payoffs," Ethan said, his tone steady as the desert wind that whispered through the scrub. "The boy's mother saw it all. Her promise to speak out, that's what you're burying under fake debts." The deputy blustered, words tumbling like loose gravel. But the crew's silence was heavier, Marcus holding up a small drive with recorded confessions from the probe, Lena's calm gaze a reminder of lives hanging in the balance. Alex stepped forward then, the floodlights catching the determination in his young face, and opened the notebook to the final unwritten page. No, not unwritten. In the ride's vibration, He'd added verses, the graphite fresh and bold, the thief hides in stars on badges, stealing voices like mine. But light from silent roads will free the caged, honor the promised, ride the truth, and chains dissolve in dawn's first roar. He held it up, the words illuminated, and the deputy read, his defenses crumbling as the poetry pierced the facade. Simple justice, moral and poetic, exposing the rot without a blow. By midnight, state investigators arrived, summoned by anonymous tips laced with the drive's evidence, the deputy's empire unraveling in questions and cuffs that clicked like final judgments. Alex's mother was located by dawn, released from a holding cell miles away, her eyes meeting her son's in a tear-streaked reunion under the safe-house eaves, the crew standing sentinel like guardians of forgotten oaths. She whispered thanks, her voice breaking the silence Alex had shared, but the boy simply handed her the notebook. A new page begun together, words of home reclaimed, promises fulfilled. Back in the safe house as the sun rose anew, the crew gathered one last time, the notebook passed around in the golden light. Javier read the final verse aloud, his voice cracking. Light from silent roads. Chains dissolve. Tears came unbidden then, tracing paths down weathered cheeks. Riley's quiet sobs for his own lost youth. Marcus's rare vulnerability as he gripped the table. Lena's hand over her mouth, Ethan's eyes stinging with Tommy's ghost finally at peace. Even Alex, the mute poet, let silent drops fall, his impossible words binding them in a family forged not by blood, but by the honor of the ride. The desert outside bloomed under the warmth, a testament to redemption's quiet power, vows enduring like the endless highway. In that circle of tears and light, the iron vow found their legacy. Not in conquest, but in the courage to carry the voiceless forward, one poem, one promise at a time. Thank you for riding with us through this tale of silent strength and unbreakable bonds. If these stories of redemption and honor resonate with you, please subscribe and turn on notifications. We'd love to share more journeys like this one with you.